Hello everyone, on today's episode of the 1 Year Life Challenge, we're going to talk about the 6 traps of the ego that keep you in your mind and how to beat them. Hello everyone, today I want to talk about the ego. It's something we've spoken about a lot during this series. The part of you that isn't really you, that voice in the head that tells you things that don't serve you, that criticizes you, that keeps you thinking and telling you that the world is a hostile place. Dissolution of the ego is something that all spiritual systems and now positive psychology is trying to remove, and remove from our lives for good reason. So as always, I'm going to begin with a quote, and that quote is, "The ego constantly competes with the spirit for control over your inner voice." Jaron L. Johnson. That's what the ego does. The ego is the part of you that is built by your brain. It's survival, it's fear or flight. It's constantly worried, anxious, and doesn't understand the abundance around it. It cannot see through the illusions that your brain creates through it, which come through just fear, belief systems, and things you were told as a child. But the spirit, which is the true you, the knowing, the things that you know for sure, that love and connection are important and things like that, is the real you. And to find that, you simply need to dissolve the ego. And that's the beautiful thing of, positive psychology and growing as an individual, is you don't need to add more and more. You just need to remove what's covering up the diamond within. I know personally, and my personal story was I was always trying to keep up appearances. It was very frustrating. I wanted the best looking house to live in. I wanted a great looking car. I wanted great looking clothes. And this was the ego. The ego was the sense of how people saw me, not how I saw myself. And I was more concerned with how people saw me than how I felt, which I know sounds crazy, but does that ring true to you? Sometimes you feel terrible, but you want to put on a brave face for other people, which sort of says to me that you're more worried about how other people feel than yourself. And remember, you cannot help anyone until you help yourself. There's only one form of help, and it's self-help, and there's only one relationship, the relationship with yourself, and everything flows through that. So how do we do this? Well, the 6 ways that we understand the ego's process is, number 1, future self. If I could just, then I would be. That's the logic that the ego uses to take you out of the present moment. You quite often will hear the voice that, if I could just make a bit more money, then I'd be able to save for a house and I'd be happy. That's the ego keeping you in a future self. The ego loves the concepts of future and past selves because when you're present in the moment, being mindful, the ego dissolves. It has no voice and it hates that. It's like a little child squealing for attention. So when you hear things like, if I could just, or in the future I will be, understand that's not you. That's the ego trying to take control. You can quickly stop that by coming back to the present moment through your breathing or acknowledging the situation you are right now. Number 2, the identification trap. The ego loves to identify with life conditions. An example would be the ego will say that you're a certain age, your name, your background, your job, and that's it. You're not much more than a collection of labels. The ego loves that, to identify with these things, because the more you identify with these things, the more suffering and pain and the more control the ego's in. An example would be, quite often people are so worried about their image on social media. There might be a photo go up where they don't look very good because they're so identified with the image that they've lost who they really are. Number 3, the permanency trap. The ego loves to tell you that you need to lock these things down, you need to get these things in order, otherwise you can't make it permanent. You've got to get that person in that relationship, because once in the relationship it will be perfect forever. It's the happily ever after story that the ego tells us. And there is no permanency in the universe. The sun has a finite lifestyle, the universe has a finite lifespan. There is no permanency, and once you embrace that, you allow things to come in and out of your life and to view them and to enjoy them rather than trying to hold on to everything. So many times I've seen relationships where one person has given up on the relationship and one person thinks it should be permanent, and they live in this limbo of just, a bad place to be. Number 4, the ego uses the isolation trap. It tells you that you are not connected, that you are separate, that you have to fight this world, that you have to get out and step on people to get ahead, or everyone's out to get you. The reality is, we know through quantum mechanics, through even studies of ecology, we are all connected, more than we'll ever understand in this body. But the ego doesn't like that, because when you're connected, you lose fear, because you know that you'll live on through multiple systems and multiple levels of love. But ultimately, the ego wants you to think that you're by yourself and you've got to really, fight the world to get somewhere, which is not true. But the ego loves that concept. Number 5, the accumulation trap. Getting more and more things taking you to a future happiness. Once I have the boat, I'll be happy. Once I'm a little bit closer to the waterside areas in my suburbs, I'll be happy. Accumulating all these things, which the ego loves, because the more things in your life, the more distracted you are, the more the ego's in control. Minimalization or minimalist living is really about connecting back to the soul, and the ego hates that. Number 6, the happiness trap. Searching for happiness. So searching for happiness is very much like your eye trying to see itself without a mirror. It can't happen because the eye is the eye and you already have it, and you can't see it because it is what it is. And that is true of happiness. We already have happiness built in as our default mechanism, but as we strive for it and go and spend and go get into bad relations, do all these things to try and find happiness, the further and further we can't find it. It's like looking in a room for some keys that you've lost, but you're never in that room. You'll never find those keys. And ultimately, happiness is simply about being present. So the ego will constantly remind you that you're not happy. And when it says you're not happy, you should ask yourself, who's saying I'm not happy? Because who would say something to me like that? I wouldn't say that to me because I love myself. So what is that voice? And it's identifying the ego. Dissolution of the ego is something that is worth your time. Through meditation and mindfulness, you can do it. And it can serve dividends. If you want to live another 30, 40, 50 years and you can dissolve the ego, you can really start living the minute the ego dissolves. Understanding it and understanding where a lot of our unhappiness comes through is really important. Getting a handle of the ego, removing its power, is such an important part of our journey. Something to think about. I can't wait to see you tomorrow, but until then, goodbye.